I'm Jeff Wolpert. I am the owner of Desert Fish Studios here in Toronto. We are a immersive audio enabled studio, so we're Dolby certified, and for Dolby Atmos, I don't want to give too many brand names, and Sony 360 certified, and we record and mix here. That's what we do, music mostly, although we have another room, which you can't see out there, that is dedicated to post-production, and stuff like Canada's Got Talent and stuff like that comes out of there. I've been at this about 40 years, so I don't know how far you want to go back, but Sunday mornings when I was a kid, my father used to wake us up playing really loud music all the time and stuff like that. And he had we had a Philips console stereo, the kind that was like a cabinet that you'd open up and the record player was inside, with an end table that was the stereo part of the speakers that you would put apart from things. It was great. So he was kind of always into listening to music and stuff like that. But when I was 13, I got my first tape recorder. And you could do something called sound on sound and sound with sound, which were kinds of sort of almost overdubbing at the time on a normal tape recorder. So I kind of got into it. Then I started playing music in high school, and I got into my first band when I was 15, and we started playing in bars we were far too young to get into, and just kept doing that. And then I went to university in music school. I came out of university with a bachelor's degree, and I was still playing. I'd been playing for a long time at this point in time. In fact, it's how I financed university, was just playing on the weekends. And then there was a program starting at McGill University, which was new at the time, this sound recording graduate degree, master's degree. I went for an interview, and I got into the program, and then the first day I sat down at the console, I went, oh, I can do this. And it felt very comfortable. And so it was kind of like a place, whenever I sit there, I know where I am. And that's really what inspired me to keep going. I came to Toronto and got involved with Inception Sound, which is still in existence, and went around telling people I owned a studio. And the Queen West scene was hot at the time in Toronto. This was time in the late 80s and the 90s when the Queen West scene was full of clubs, the Horseshoe Club, the Rivoli, the Bamboo, Cameron House, places like that. And there were bands around playing original material. And I knew some people because I was a player in Montreal, and I got involved with those, and I started making records with those people. From there, it just kind of grew into, I went from there to McClear Pathé as the chief engineer, which was a big place. Did a bunch of work there, and then I went completely freelance. And I had a place up at a place called Phase 1 Studios, which is in the northeast part of town. It's gone now. And I wanted to come back downtown, so I came back downtown, started Desert Fish, and we ended up here. I always loved owning a studio because then it's mine and I can do whatever I want in it. We found this place, and it's in a remarkable spot right in the middle of downtown. Great landlords, great building to be in. I'm grateful for that. I think at this point I'm just gonna keep it going for as long as I can. I have a fair investment in speakers, and a lot of them, which makes for a lot of them. This system is called 9.1.4, so 914 we call it. It's so 9 speakers around you, a subwoofer channel, although if you look, the subwoofers there are 2, and that's just to make the specification to get enough low end into the system, and then 4 on the ceiling. I originally had 6, you can see there's additional mounts, but the room is not big enough for 6. It didn't feel comfortable. It felt better to have the 4 because the 1 felt close to you when it was above you. I need something that can isolate my speakers on the ceiling. And then there was an idea, why don't we just do the rest of it? I noticed a change pretty immediately. So what drove me to it was feeling that it could be better, and that it could be sharper, and I could get a better feeling of location, which increases my feeling of immersion. You could say it's all about accuracy, and not such a blurry image of what was going on there. And so that's what drove me to it. We went through Long & McQuaid, their kind of pro audio division. And I have a very long and productive history with Long & McQuaid. This console came from Long & McQuaid and expedited through them. They really were a big help. We need to level the V120s because they need to be gravitationally level, right? So that all the cushiony, springy isolation elements are working evenly. And we got them up there, and then angling was super easy. The mechanism is super easy to use as a kind of an XY kind of a thing that you can adjust them on. And once we got them up there, you know how to do one, you know how to do all of them. A friend of mine named Ronald Prent and Gus Skinnis came up from the US to come up here and test the room. We used this one, and both Gus and Ronald's a major player in the immersive audio field as well, loved the sound of the room. So they were very, they were kind of blown away, given that it's not a giant space or anything like that. And so it was, they thought it was a great sounding room, and those guys actually know, right? Here's the thing. Most people say, and I bought these great speakers. You don't have to spend that kind of money to get really decent speakers. There are, the technology gets less expensive as time goes on. And if you can find a way to not suck the energy out of the speaker into vibrating something physically and that sort of stuff, you end up with a much better performing speaker. So rather than spend another $10,000 to get yourself better speakers, which would, if we're lucky, buy one of these, you're in a situation where you can improve it by improving the system. And it's all about the system. People say, my room sounds good. They don't really say my speakers sound good. They're talking about the room. They're talking about the system at that point in time. And every part of the system counts. So yes, good speakers, and that's highly subjective, I understand, but there are a lot of good speakers, not terribly expensive out there. A room that responds well, which means the smaller the room, the more low frequencies you have to absorb. If you look around, there's a lot of all these cabinets, they're all there for low frequency absorption. Right, so the V120s are up in the ceiling there. Those are PMC C45Is or something like C45, I think is the model number. Those are meant to be wall or ceiling mounted. So they're thin. They have thin cabinets, which means that those are not powered. So the amplifier is external to those. On all the other speakers, there's enough depth in the cabinet to put an amplifier in. That's a good way to do it. But for the ceiling speakers, the other problem is you put the amps in, they get a lot heavier, and they don't know where they're going, right? So people could be drilling into drywall, and then the speaker drops, and that's not a good idea. These speakers, by the way, you can't see them, but there are safety cables that are on the part that's screwed into the ceiling. There's a little cable there that goes around the mount just in case something bad happens. Yeah. So the V120 has 4 absorbers, and then the L bracket goes through it, and then the speaker hangs on the L part with a brace that stands as view, and you have to center the gravity a little bit under the thing, and then you have those 4 mounts that isolate the system. And then from there you can tilt it and rotate it, and it doesn't change the balance at all or anything like that. They're pretty perfect. So using an L bracket, in our situation, we could angle up as much as we needed to. There's a C bracket, which would let us angle down further. So we chose that because of the angle that we were looking for. I think you could put anything up on that mount and it would work. It's not really speaker specific or anything like that. And the speakers are those PMCs which are matched tonally to the rest of the system. It's all PMC. So at the University of Toronto, we have we call them laboratories because that's how they're funded, but it's basically a recording studio. And we have 4 rooms, and in 2 of the rooms we have ceiling grids where we can multi-position any kind of speakers that we want, and so on and so forth. So we do a lot of moving things around and experimental sort of situations and things like that. But in general, one of the problems with the students that we have is that while we have a good monitoring situation at the school, they then go home and we don't know what they're listening on at that point in time. Every student coming in gets a profile done of themselves in our fancy control room. And then we also give them a good set of headphones. And those 2 things together, we give them a customized profile, which makes them feel like they're listening in the control room when they're at home listening on the speaker. It's interesting in immersive audio that in the 9.1 setup, we have these 2 speakers, we call them wides. And when you have them, or when I have them, I tend to use them a great deal. And it's because, as a client of mine once said, it's more stereo than the other speakers. And because they're wider apart, it means that we have this way to pull around the circle and just make things feel a little bit wider without having to put them so far back that they may feel out of place, like behind you or something like that. I recently upgraded my interfaces to kind of match the quality of everything else. And that's really what's going on. Project-wise, there's always something going on. We have new things from a couple of artists that will come out in 2026. Some are done, some are in the midst of being done, and so on and so forth. I can tell you the names of the artists. Loreena McKennitt will have something new. Holly Cole will have something new. The Art of Time Ensemble will have something new. And they're all will have a stereo, but an immersive version of them as well. I do find that having since put the pucks in and everything like that, the whole thing is sharper and more fun and stuff like that. This may be digressing, but let's just, in the future, as in the past, if I had to listen on a system that was blurry and distorted and not evenly balanced and stuff like that, like I wouldn't have lasted this long. And it really, I can't stress how much it is important to make the system work. Where people say, hey, did you get new speakers or did you get a new, I said, yeah, that's probably not your problem. Your problem is where you are, and it's much harder to solve. I get that. And it's how things are working systematically and how they're tied together and how they're coupled and all that sort of stuff. So that's what I think really is the big issue now. I was very happy with this upgrade. I thought this was a big deal to do and a relatively small change that seems to let the speakers live up to the potential. The one thing that happened is that it opened up the top layer, which is truly the immersive layer in this. We define any speaker system as being immersive if it has a top layer. Otherwise, we call it surround, right? Now I can decide where it's going and what it's doing, which really helps a great deal. Most people are listening to music in headphones. And if you're listening in headphones, good or bad, love them or hate them, it doesn't really matter. That's just the reality, right? So between the V120s and the rest of the mounts and all that, the idea that I can hear what's really going on is both remarkable and completely necessary.